Hey everybody, welcome back. We are at episode 10. Woohoo! Today's topic is so juicy. It is about the sister wound. Oh, there are so many wounds. There are so many family wounds. There's the mother wound, the father wound, the brother wound. And today I'm going to be diving deep on the sister wound. And I'll probably talk about each of those wounds and dedicate an actual episode to each of them and interview someone on the brother wound because I actually don't have that activated in me. But it'd be really, really interesting to have that perspective from a brother. But, anyways, the sister wound is something that is very near and dear to my heart. I'm passionate speaking about it, connecting with others on it, and just sharing my truth so much to the point that actually in my 9 to 5, when I was still there, I dedicated I created an event and I hosted it for our women's group, and it was all about healing the sister wound. I'm super grateful that the women who were running the events were progressive and allowed me to share something that not many people see at work, right? I mean, come on, if you saw that event at work, wouldn't you be curious? I would think, oh my gosh, hell yeah, we're talking about the sister wound. It was a pretty interesting experience talking about it at work. Some people could relate, some people couldn't. But interestingly enough, a lot of people resonated with the mother wound. But anyways, so back to the sister wound. For the longest time, I was just kind of embarrassed about it, that I had a sister wound. And then I realized that the more I shared about it and was transparent, that I am not the only one that feels like this. And it's so easy when you don't share to think that you're terminally unique and that no one else has this experience. And then I realized when I share the truth and people come up to me and they say, oh, that actually resonates with me. And then I know that I'm not alone. So today I'm going to talk about what the sister wound is, how it has originated in my life, where it comes from, where it stems from, personal stories, and just anecdotal examples of how it shows up and the tools that I use to heal this wound. All right, so let's jump to it. So, what is a sister wound? If you're unfamiliar with it, I'm going to give you a definition. And the sister wound is as simple as understanding what your relationship to other women is, right? And so, when you think about the first models of how you relate to other women, it most likely stems from your early experiences. And where did we first experience relationships with women? In our nuclear family. So whether you grew up with a mother or actual sisters, or maybe you had childhood friends that resembled your sisters, or you had a really good best friend growing up. Any early memories you had with women that resemble a quote unquote sister. But instead of seeing other women as your ally, as your friend, you start to see them as your enemy, your competition. And you might have this desire to not want to bring them up. Maybe you see them as a threat. And so you think about the power dynamic. How can I make myself seem better than they are? Right. And so the way that the sister wound can show up is by mistrusting other women. You see this a lot with women who tend to not have many female friends because, I don't know, maybe they were bullied in early, experiences at school or just in their family. They just had bad experiences with women, and so they just mistrust them and fear them and tend to find safety in other relationships. Maybe they have more male friends. And the sister wound can show up looking like you're jealous. You're jealous of other people or of other women. You often compare yourself to them. You think that you're better than them, or you think that they're better than you. And so there's just this inherent sense of jealousy. And as a result of that, you often want to compete with them because you think that there is not enough to go around. The sister wound can also show up as insecurity, right? Feeling like you don't deserve to be friends with someone, or someone's presence makes you feel insecure about yourself. So maybe you shut down and don't want to have close relationships, or you don't know how to hold relationships with other women. And this also kind of segues into fearing groups of women. And so maybe you were bullied again or ousted in school, and you have this fear of being rejected again, that people won't want to play with you, they won't like you, they don't want to hang out with you, or maybe they were really close to you and then all of a sudden they just turned on you and you don't know what the fuck happened, which is actually something that happened to me when I was younger. I remember I was in daycare when I was probably in 4th grade. I don't even remember this chick's name, but I just remember we were close. And then all of a sudden, I don't know, for whatever reason, the mood changed that day and she wasn't my friend anymore. And she would just roll her eyes at me. And I thought, what the fuck? Like, how are we BFFs yesterday? And then all of a sudden today, she's just rolling her eyes at me, acting like she doesn't even know me or hates me or whatever. And real talk, that's actually how I learned to roll my eyes, because I would just copy her. But for whatever reason, I don't know, children can just be really mean sometimes. And sometimes they just want to go with the group and they want to socially ostracize someone. They don't want to be the one ostracized, so they'll just go with it instead of standing up for what's right. And that's what happened to me. So that was really sad. That stayed with me. But anyways, and then other times a sister wound can show up is, when you start to see the other person as your enemy, and you don't see them as your sister, your friend. And it's real. There are many different ways of how it originates, of how it shows up. And these are just the common, like, quote unquote, effects of having a sister wound, of not trusting other women, the jealousy, the competitiveness. And I remember in the corporate event that I did, a lot of women were even talking about how the patriarchy actually perpetuates this narrative of pitting women against each other, and how we have to come together in order to combat the effects of the patriarchy. And so that was just a really, really interesting perspective. But I am not going to dive into that. I am mainly going to share about my personal experience and how my personal experiences have influenced my sister wound and the different tools that I use to heal from it. And so, how did it originate in my life, and just all of the core wounds that I have from it? So I grew up with a sister, an older sister. She's 2 years older than me. And she was the first person I ever loved. And I talk about it in my content. I sprinkle bits and pieces of my stories in my content. But you don't really get the full story unless you're on my newsletter, or unless you actually listen to my podcast, because you can only write so much on Instagram and have 3 minutes on TikTok. So I much prefer long form content for people to actually really get substantive content, and just being able to allow and express myself to share fully the depths of what I'm embodying and my emotions, right? Feel like it's just very one-sided on the social media platforms because of the time limit. And so anyways, I grew up with an older sister, and I loved her. I still love her. She's one of my best friends. And I loved hanging out with her when I was a kid. I even dressed like her when I was younger. I mean, my mom, she had 2 girls, and so she wanted us to dress the same. And our birthdays are 1 week apart. They're 1 week apart. So anytime I had a birthday, it was always celebrated with my sister. And I love hanging out with her. I loved hanging out with her friends. I'm sure I was pretty annoying. I remember being annoying to her when I was growing up because she just wanted to hang out with her own friends. And I just thought she was the coolest chick, the coolest person. I just wanted to be like her, and I just wanted to hang out with her and have her friends be my friends. And just do everything that she did. I mean, she was really annoyed with me because I remember she used to have this imaginary line outside her room, and anytime I would cross it, she would pinch me. She would pinch me. And I would think, I don't understand why she's so mean to me. I just want to hang out. I just want to love her. And so I definitely just remember being completely enamored by her. And so I just had this sense of wanting to be super, super close, right? But as time went on, subconsciously, and like little comments here and there, my parents would say how, my sister's really smart, and I just wasn't textbook savvy as much as she was. She was really much a studious child growing up. And for me, I mean, playing was my thing. I loved to play outside. I didn't want to be stuck at home doing homework. Like, that's just fucking boring. I just wanted to play outside with my chalk, right on the street, ride my bike, play basketball. I was just all about being outdoors. And so studying just didn't resonate. I honestly don't even know if it actually resonates with any kid. To be honest, if people, I mean, if it does, kudos to you, but for me, I don't know, it really didn't. And so I just had this idea stuck in my head, this belief of, oh, she's smarter than me. She's smarter than me. Okay, so I'm not as smart. Okay, I'll play that card. And I just remember growing up too that people would say she's nicer than me. And I actually didn't even realize that she was, I didn't really consider myself a bully, but people said I was a bully. I didn't realize that. I didn't understand why either. I was a very confused kid. But people would say, "Oh, she's nicer than you." So I thought, okay, I guess I'm the mean one then. So it just goes back to show you, really, really be conscious and mindful of what do you say to children, because we're binary thinkers, right? You don't understand complexity and nuance and the gray until you're much older, until you have the cognitive capacity and capability to understand more than love and hate, right? It's all about binary thinking for a child, black and white, left and right. It just makes sense. It just makes a lot of things easier to understand, comprehend, all that goodness. And so when someone was telling me, oh, she's smart, okay, I guess I'm not. She's nice, okay, I guess I'm not. And so all of these things. And so I just had this idea in my head that my parents just had a favorite kid. And I didn't understand the depth and capacity of a parent's heart to actually love more than one child. I understand that now. And I see that also with my sister because she has 2 kids. But I just did not understand that. It's you had to have a favorite. I even remember asking my partner one day, "Oh, so who's your favorite sibling?" And he looked at me and he said, "What do you do? Like, what are you talking about? Like, what kind of question is that?" And I thought, Dude, don't lie. Everybody has fucking favorites. Come on, I won't tell. I just thought like that, you know? And so I just naturally thought that I had to compete with my sister for my parents' love and affection. And so that's where I first learned how to be competitive towards other women, how to compare myself. And it was just this limiting belief that I developed as a kid. And it was also very confusing because like I mentioned, I really, really admired my sister. She was the first woman that I ever loved. And so there's this desire of wanting to be just like her, but also at the same time hating it that I wanted to be like her, because there was this, her personality was imprinted on me, is what I felt like, of her being the first child, or, her having more pictures than me in the photo album. Like, we laugh about it because I have my own photo album too, but maybe I have 3/4 of it filled with my own photos because a fourth of it is filled with her photos, right? My parents just took a lot of pictures. I totally understand and I get it. You have the first kid, everything is new. And then all of a sudden you have the second kid. And I just thought, oh, well, they didn't care as much because they already captured all the pictures from the first time they did it. And then, one of my mentors, she told me, your parents are probably just trying to keep both of you alive, because she has multiple children. And she said, I don't think it was actually intentional of thinking that raising you was boring, or that, it just wasn't as important. But when you have multiple children, it's a lot of fucking work, And so it's just interesting to know the stories, the conditioning, the narratives of how you perceive things through that lens, right? And it was misconstrued. And I didn't actually look at it. I just only knew at the feelings that I had. And so there was definitely this desire to want to be like her, but then also hating that I wanted to be like her, because I thought the only way for me to be loved was to be like someone else. And so that definitely stunted my ability to honor my unique self, really honor who I was, because I thought, well, if my parents love her so much, then I know that I can guarantee love and affection by being a carbon copy, And so that is really kind of the foundation of where the sister wound happens for me. And it has showed up in many, 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 many different facets of my life. So one of the ways that it showed up at work was, if you have bosses that are female, right? If you have colleagues that are female, that shit gets activated. And that got activated for me. And I will preface it by saying that a lot of our core wounds happen in the workplace, and they resemble our family dynamics. Your boss can be resembled as your caretaker. Your colleagues can be resembled as your siblings. And so really look at the relationship you have to authority figures. If you are somehow acting out, if you are nervous, getting help from your boss, it's just like really look at your relationship to your parents and see how that's playing out with your boss or your supervisor. And then look at your colleagues. Is your relationship like to your siblings? And do you feel like you can trust your colleagues? Do you feel like you can collaborate with them? All that good stuff. And so for me, anytime that I had female bosses or colleagues, it would show up for me and I would project this family unit onto my work family. And I wasn't even conscious of it at the time, prior to doing this inner child work and spiritual work, but I could definitely see in retrospect how it actually showed up. And so I would find myself getting jealous of female colleagues if I thought my bosses liked them better. Or if, I'd always want to know, well, what's happening in your one-on-ones with our boss? Like, are they more, are you getting the raise? Are you getting a bigger piece of the pie, all of those things, because it was just as black and white. Someone's getting more than the other, or does your boss have favoritism? And then on the flip side of that, if you are a boss, why do you have favoritism towards another colleague versus like your direct, not support, but your direct report, as opposed to another? And so, anytime that you can bring personal development, spiritual development into whatever's coming up for you, whatever triggers you have, just always ask yourself, why? Why do you feel the way you feel? Where can this be linked to an early experience in your life? What pattern is playing out here? Those are the top 3 questions that I always ask myself anytime I feel triggered or notice an emotion or sensation that's coming up where I can't really make sense of it. But that allows me to make sense of it by asking those 3 questions. And so, an example was when I was working in New York. I have 2 examples, actually. One of them was when I was just at this agency. There were just so many women. It reminded me a lot of just sorority like experiences, and feeling the need to be cool, or feeling the need that I couldn't be myself because I needed to be a part of this, sorority like type of environment. And I remember this actually happened to me twice. Okay, I'm gonna share this, and this is like this is where my mistrust of bosses come from. I was gonna share something else, but we're gonna fucking go with it. And so, what ended up happening was I told my boss, I said, I'm actually interested in doing something else that might align with the company. Maybe I'll even look in that different department, because she was asking me about my career goals. And it just wasn't within, her department. And it was with the other department within the same company. And I just wanted to be honest about it. And I hate this because a lot of times companies will say, oh, we really prioritize internal mobility. We want to keep you in the company. It's all about employee engagement and retention. And when it comes down to it, I mean, I have yet to see I know a couple companies, because I've had friends that worked at different companies where they've had so many different jobs and different functions, and they've been there for like 10, 15 years. So, but when people say that, I think oftentimes they want to appear that they care about internal mobility and keeping you, but in actuality and reality, that might not be the case. And that often tests a supervisor's emotional maturity and managerial maturity to understand if they're actually going to follow through and have your best interests at heart. And so really pay attention to that. That is just my 2 cents and my mentorship hat. And so anyways, so I told my boss this. Some people might say, oh my God, you don't ever do that. You should never be honest about what you want in your career, blah, 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 but what can I say? I was naive and she was asking me, and I thought she had my best interests at heart, and she did not. So what ended up happening was I thought it was very strange. There were multiple people coming into her office like that week that I told her that I wanted to pursue something else within the same company, a different department. And so I could hear little bits and pieces of a conversation, and it sounded like she was interviewing for my role. And it was a very small company. I didn't have anybody to talk to. The finance person was like the HR person. That's how bootstrapped they were. And I told the finance person, I said, I think my supervisor is actually hiring for my role. And she said, well, that's impossible because she has to notify me. I'm the finance person. We need to see if we have headcount for someone, bringing on someone and having the money to actually pay for their salary. I don't know. I don't think she would do that behind my back, but I'm going to ask her about it. And I thought, oh shit, no, I'm telling you in confidence. But I totally get it in retrospect. You just want to validate. And so what ended up happening a couple of days later, both my supervisor and the finance person, they sat me down and they said, yes, we're actually letting you go. We are interviewing for your role. Da, 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 da. And I was just completely blindsided. And the thing that was the real kicker was, oh, but you can't tell anybody what happened. Right. That was such a bad company. And so that's what ended up happening. And so that to me made me think I can't be honest about about my desires at work. I can't be honest about my goals. I can't have any goals that are beyond my certain job unless it falls within the realm of what my supervisor is doing. I have to stay within the lines. I have to color within the lines, all of that stuff. I can't reach for beyond what I am currently getting. And that was a really hard lesson. And fast forward, that almost similar thing happened to me. And so I remember being in a role where, I was at my company, I want to say for 4 or 5 years. And at that point, I was at the same role. Granted, I was, doing comms for so many different leaders at the time. But I just wanted more. I just wanted more. I had more education at the time. I wanted to try something different. I wanted to explore something different. And to my face, my supervisor acted like she was on board with it. And then when it actually happened, it created this sort of rift in our relationship, this desire of wanting to explore something new, but then also the manager taking offense that somehow me leaving meant that she wasn't a good manager or that I was unhappy. And this was for a company that really touted internal mobility and really prioritizing and having campaigns about internal mobility, but yet the say-do ratio of managers was just totally off. And so that was very confusing. And I remember how contentious my relationship got with this female manager and realizing, wow, did I not learn my lesson? But, I was naive again, really wanted to trust other women in the workplace and really feel as if they do support me and that they are aligned with the company's policies and campaigns around internal mobility, when in actuality, it just comes down to the emotional maturity of your specific manager and your personal experience. And so even though that can be universal at certain companies, you always have to make sure what the personal relationship is like that the manager has with that specific policy. And so I just thought, all right, she showed me her true colors. I'm just going to put my head down and act as if I am so happy and not looking for a job. So, from both of those experiences in the workplace, it definitely left a really sour taste in my mouth. And it's really sad to think about that there are women who, would stunt a person's growth. Granted, they were more concerned about talent planning, their pipeline, having to do more work, if there's a gap on their team, which is totally understandable. And so that's why you want to make sure that when you do work for someone, it aligns with your values. And I will say, I did have a female boss that was in New York, and she helped me heal that. She helped me heal that sister wound in the workplace. And the reason why was because I remember telling her I wanted to go to business school, right? When you tell someone that ultimately means that you're actually going to leave, or you're either going to do it part-time and stay, or you might pursue something else that's beyond your current role because now you have a higher education. And I remember her even before I applied to business school, she would always tell me that I know I'm not going to have you forever at this company, but I really cherish you. And I want you to know that. And you're so smart. And I hope one day to work for you. And I never forgot that. Honestly, when I think about one of my favorite bosses, it was her. She taught me personal lessons and also business lessons of how to act, how to be, how to conduct myself. And she was just always real as fuck, right? She was always about accommodating me and whatever, worked for me, because she wanted me also to be happy at work, because she understood that happy workers equals, happy employees and, happy, retained, engaged employees, and, productivity for the company and also profit, all that stuff. Anyways, and so, I remember telling her, hey, I'm thinking about going to business school. And she was very supportive. She wrote out my recommendation all the way. And she would always tell me how proud she was of me. And she understood the fact that I wasn't going to be there forever, but that it was okay. And that's actually normal to want to explore different jobs, that you don't have to stay at a job for a long time. And so it was just really of the mindset of allowing other people to grow along with you. And even if that means leaving you behind, and how can you actually help them? And so that really helped heal the sister wound, even though she had, it was like a different power dynamic and she was my supervisor. um she represented, the female experience for me at the workplace, and that just really helped change my perspective. It helped me had a different experience. And so, it's so interesting because sometimes most importantly, the relationships that we have with people allow us to heal our childhood experiences. And I like to often ask myself and even clients, is this experience healing you or hurting you? Or are you healing or are you hurting, right? Someone else's experience. And so it's always just a double-sided question, and it really helps bring the conscious perspective to it of, what is going on. And so that's an experience of that's how the sister wound showed up in my life at the workplace. Okay. So we're gonna move on to romantic relationships, my favorite. Just kidding. It's not my favorite, but it's probably my juiciest. But anyway, I would say in romantic relationships, the comparison, the competitiveness, and the jealousy, that definitely came out. I have always been fascinated with exes of whomever I'm dating, whomever. I can find information on them. I think every woman out there just has this intuitive side hustle of being a spy. They can totally be a spy. I think every woman can just conduct that side hustle and just have it be her own business. But I'm really good at finding information. I know how to find information, all of that stuff. And so for me, the way that it was playing out was just always wanting to be very curious about, what previous relationships were like, wanting to open the X files and have those conversations of, how did you two date? How did you two um break up? And obviously thinking about the better quote unquote type of conversations of, who's better cook, who's better at sex, who's better at this, did your parents like me more, blah blah blah. Like, can you see a future with me more? Like all of that stuff that I think a lot of women compare themselves to. And or like, who's prettier? Did you upgrade? Did you up level? Or am I just, a person that you picked to play out your fantasy? Or did you choose me subconsciously because you're still wounded from your last girlfriend? All of that stuff. I was very, very obsessed with wanting to know what previous relationships looked like, because I wanted to know what situation I was walking into. And mind you, in the very beginning, I talked about how, I had that wound of being the younger sister. The younger sister meaning that somebody was already there before me. right? Their experience, their memories were already imprinted before me, and I felt like I had to step into it. And so I definitely saw that whole subconscious um, relating happen, and this desire to almost think like, oh, well, if they loved them, then maybe they want me to be like them. Just how my parents loved my sister. And I thought maybe they want me to be like her. Right. So I would be very, very curious about exes, and I would want to know what their occupation was. I wanted to know if they were dating anybody. I wanted to know if they still talked to their exes, all of that stuff. I was just very, very, very obsessed. And I just saw it play out to a point of not necessarily like detrimental to me or like obsessive, but I was just very curious. And I would say usually in the beginning of relationships or people I would date, I would often take front and center topics for the first couple, or just in the beginning of the relationships. And then eventually, once I got comfortable in the relationships, that's when I started to feel more secure as time went on. And then I no longer needed to ask certain questions. And now I know the difference today of, like, I mean, honestly, the more information you have, the more detrimental it is to your sanity, or at least to my sanity, because then I can just create stories, right? I can create stories. Um, I mean, I particularly don't like if anybody I'm dating is still friends with their ex. Granted, I understand if they share pets or whatever, if they have some tie to each other where they absolutely must have to speak to each other. But for me, that's just a little tough, Um, and I think I will keep it current. So I'll keep it not current as in like right now today, but I mean with my current partner, I just like, there were definitely both triggers that were happening in the beginning of the relationship. And I remember him mentioning something and him just being so upset. And I just got really irritated about having, him being triggered, quote unquote, me paying for it, me paying for his like wounded triggers. And it's just like, no, it's not fair. It's not fair. It's almost like when other people say, oh, you think everybody's a bad guy when you're in a relationship because of your past experience, and you make all those new people pay for the old guy's experience or the old, girlfriend's experience that you had. And so I definitely felt that. And it was so interesting because I thought that my partner's ex and I were similar. And I actually thought like, oh, is this like some subconscious picking where, he's trying to heal that relationship through me? And I just got really upset. And that's how my sister wound came up of, I just want to be my own individual self. I don't want to have to be in someone's shadow. I just want to be me. I don't want to be like anybody else. I don't want to have someone think, oh, you remind me of her. Like, that is not a compliment. And so that was really, really tough because I did see similarities. I did hear that. And I just was really, really upset. And so for a while, I really thought, oh, did he just pick me because he subconsciously needed to heal something, or did he really love me? Or I thought, would he actually be with me if she didn't actually leave? Stuff like that. And it really showed and mirrored the insecurity that I had in myself of how the sister wound was still coming up, or of me wanting to compare myself, right? Of, who does he love more? All of that stuff. And so I just really, really found it coming to a head um, in our first year of dating, and just, not feeling fully secure. Um, and just thinking about, okay, if she wanted to meet with him, would he do it? Why do you feel the need to meet with her? Just all of these things that come up in relationships when you're dating someone new, you're establishing what your boundaries are, when someone might have a different perspective on what their boundaries are, and learning to meet each other's needs in a way that isn't codependent or harmful to someone's autonomy and ability to be a sovereign entity from you, right? Interdependence, that type of dynamic. And so I remember one time just getting like, I couldn't even hear experiences. I remember one of my girlfriends, I was telling her, I was like, yeah, I just don't even want to hear about past experiences, because I just think of those experiences being with the other woman. And and she said, "Oh, I am not like that at all. In fact, I'm very curious about my husband's experiences because it shaped him and who he was." And I said to her, "Girl, I'm not there yet, okay?" And she was, that perspective was totally like Buddha to me. And that's just me owning it, right? Like, that's a shadow side of mine of, oh yeah, I feel insecure sometimes. I feel like I want to compare myself and da 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 da. And sometimes I think, oh, who's better? And that's okay. I don't need to fucking shame myself for having those feelings or not having that Buddha like mentality of, oh, everything in the past was just for learning and growing and da da da. It's like, yo, I'm real, okay? Like, I may be a coach, but I have my flaws. I'm imperfect. And, that's just what it's about, loving all parts of you, even if it might not be deemed as, like quote unquote advanced, or it doesn't even have to be fucking advanced. It's just like wherever you are, there you are, right? And just own that experience. And if I didn't have a problem with it, I wouldn't be talking about it, and there would be no episode, and you wouldn't be nodding your head wherever you're listening to this going, yep, girl, I relate. Thank you for talking about it, because I can't talk about it myself. Right. And so I just always have to think beyond myself, beyond my ego, beyond the image and protection of like this image I want to uphold to like make you think I'm this perfect person, because I'm just not. I'm not. And so I remember telling my girlfriend, I I have a problem hearing about past experiences, and I just don't want to, because I think about him being with her, even though he doesn't say it, but it's like, bitch, I know you were, and it just makes me laugh. It just makes me laugh, and it makes me think, oh, Lisa, I love you. You're like your unique, wild, badass self. Like, there's no one like you. And you are different, and you are not like anybody else. And how can you ever compare yourself to anybody else? And first of all, why would you ever want to be anybody else? Because you are bad as fuck. Okay. Anyway, total tangent, but I'm sure y'all can relate. And so, um, what is it? I remember he was showing me a place, and I just remember, like, I think it was just, we were in Carmel, and he was telling me like, oh, I went to this hotel for my birthday, da da da. And then I said to him, oh, did you go there with her, your ex? Like, I was so like, ew, and it was just so, I laugh at it now because I just give myself so much love. And I think, oh, baby girl, like, it's okay. There's enough. There's one of my really good friends who says, love multiplies, it doesn't divide, right? That abundance. You can love both things. You can love an ex, have that experience with an ex, not even want to be with them at all, and be like, thank God, if I met that person today, I would definitely not want to be with them. But that is okay, because they helped shape who I was. And I love you. And I'm glad that our relationship broke up, because it brought me to you. It brought me to a better person, and I did up level. Right. And so at the time, I was definitely not at that mentality. And so I was really upset, and, we ended up going home, and I was just telling him how I thought he was just playing out his subconscious healing journey on me. And I don't know if he really loved me. I was just in my feels, feeling really insecure and down about myself and my competition, my comparison, my jealousy. My sister wound was coming up. And he told me this parable, which was, I mean, I literally wanted to punch him in the fucking face. And I understand, right? There are certain things that you can, do to make your partner feel a certain way if they are insecure. But, he didn't bring up his ex when he was showing me that hotel in Carmel. I did. I was the one that did. He didn't mention it. And I've heard about it now that is called retroactive jealousy. So basically being jealous of like the person you're dating, their past experiences. But I mean, obviously we're older. They are going to have exes and they are going to have relationships with other people where they are, you know, there were people before you and there might be people after you, but in the present moment, there is you. And so just own that. And that just shows you where hell is, right? Either looking in the past, looking to the future, present is present. Okay. And so we were in bed and he told me this parable. And it was like a Buddhist parable or I don't know, one of those lessons. And he said, there are two monks, they're crossing a river and they're actually, they see a woman drowning and they're not allowed to touch women. They're not allowed to, to just interact with them, all that stuff. And then because they see the woman drowning, one of them helps the woman and carries her across the river. And then she's safe. And then they leave the woman there. She's safe. And they walk away. And the other monk is thinking, what the fuck? How could you do that? How could you carry this woman? How could you, we're not allowed to. You're not supposed to allow to interact with women. You're not even supposed to touch them. That's bad. And then the other monk looks at this, monk and is saying, who's hysterical. And he says, I'm not the one carrying her. You are. And when my partner told me that, I literally wanted to sock him in the face. Because, I mean, if you can actually process that parable, it makes a ton of sense. And it was very apropos in that moment. And I could totally understand. And that was a gut punch to my ego. And it was true, right? He had processed the relationship. It was already done. There was no need to bring it up. And yet I was the one bringing it up because I had the problem with it, right? And so oftentimes we think about ownership in relationship of, whose triggers whose responsibilities who. And in that particular experience and instance and case, it was my responsibility to heal that wound because it was coming up in my relationship. It was almost like, having a threesome, but, it was just with a ghost. And it wasn't him having a threesome. It was me having a threesome and bringing that energy in. And so I realized, all right, touche, motherfucker. Touche. And I hated that, right? I hated that moment because I just felt so ugly in my insecurity, the shoulds of not being like a totally secure woman and confident and knowing that he is with me because of me and not because of some subconscious stuff that he needed to heal, right? Completely owning that and being in my worth and being regal and feeling just that queen energy of unwavering knowing of self, right? Grounded, centered in my body. And I didn't like that. I didn't like that I felt insecure I didn't like that I was letting another person get to me. I didn't like that I was comparing myself. I didn't like that I felt like I had to be like someone else in order to be loved. And so it was just really about this radical journey of owning who I was, right? And this can relate even beyond the extension of the sister wound, right? Oftentimes we think that we need other people to validate our existence and be like others in order to be accepted and loved and not rejected and part of the group, when in actuality, what will make you loved, accepted, and feel secure is by truly being your wild, authentic self and sharing your wild truth. And so, by completely owning that and being okay with disappointing other people of who they think you should be, that is the way. That is the way to your liberation. And so, for me, I definitely thought about, okay, that was a total wake up call. And I realized that I need to really work on this. And so I was seeing an EMDR therapist at the time. That's another somatic therapeutic tool, similar to EFT, but you use your eyes, or if you do it online, you do bilateral tapping on your body, the butterfly tapping, and you process it. And so I said to my therapist, I said, all right, I need to knock this out. It's been really limiting me. It's been such a huge blocker in my life. And I no longer want to live in the shadows of other women. And it was so strange because I have such a great relationship with my sister, but these remnants of, my younger childhood were coming out, but I never actually processed how that made me feel as a kid, of feeling less than, right? As an adult, I felt that we were equal and I had so much love for her, but as a child, I never had any outlet to express that. And that's why I love somatic work. And I think it's so important to really hone in on the origins of your traumas and your triggers and your emotional, intense experiences, because it just comes from unprocessed experiences. And so I knew that I needed to go back there and recall that fragmented piece of me. And so that is what I did. I ended up going back there and working on it and tapping on it and getting current with it. And I realized that it was just such this multifaceted, it wasn't just about my sister. It was about like all things that the woman represented to me, right? Um, Even thinking about sexy women, right? I just remember thinking that, I grew up very religious, and, um, learning sex was only for marriage. Masturbation is bad. God's watching you if you're doing it. Oh my God. And all of those things. And just this, like the whole male gaze thing and wanting to cover yourself up and all of that stuff. And so, like, there was that too of, feeling jealous of women who were also sexually free and not understanding that, and almost slut shaming them, right? Like wondering, well, why do they have to wear stuff like that? Why are they showing their titties? And like, I just didn't understand that. But now I know the other side to it, because I have, explored what does it mean to have a sensual awakening or sexual awakening, and get in touch with that sexual part of you, because it is totally natural. It's a natural human desire to feel pleasure. And I'm so glad that all of this sacred sexuality, divine, feminine stuff is, toes along the lines of how do we harness and use our pleasure as a way to not only, like, you can manifest, there's sex magic, there's all of this stuff, and a lot of the different, kundalini, harnessing sexual energy, tantra, tao tantric work. And I'm going to be working with a coach soon on Tao Tantric arts, and just exploring that and using that because it is the most potent energy you can use, because it's creativity. It's using your creative energy. And it was so interesting because I used to think, well, why are people talking about using sexual energy, for creation? And then I realized, oh, it's because people are in their sexual energy when they are creating life. And that is why they equate it, and they, it's synonymous with the life force energy. And how do you cultivate that? And how do you bring that energy up into your body through your crown, all of that stuff. And so, it definitely keeps you young and all that stuff. And that's like a whole other episode. This whole other episode. But the way it ties back to the sister wound is because, I would often look at other people, especially if they were sexually liberated, and one, be jealous. Well, first, I wouldn't be jealous. I would be judging. I would be judging those girls. I would think, why the fuck do they need to wear that? Blah, 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 blah. And then, after doing this work, I realized, oh, in fact, it's actually reclamation of your body, because patriarchy tells you that you have to cover it up, makes you feel shameful about your body, these beauty standards of your body, and that oftentimes you can't be looking hot or sexual because you need to protect yourself, because a man will, I don't know, want to touch you or catcall you. And, it's just that feeling of not being safe in your body. And so by, putting it on, or showing more of it, or feeling comfortable in it, or feeling embodied, allows you to reclaim your body as your own, not for anyone else's desire, but yours. And so now I understand the reclamation of that. And I don't hate on people that are very sensual and all that stuff. In fact, I own it now. And that is definitely, the archetype that I'm exploring. Granted, wild woman archetype, but granted, there are many different facets to that, but ultimately it is connecting to your truth, like your wild, authentic self. And so when I see people that are very sensual, owning who they are, I just think, yeah, that's a bad bitch right there. Fuck yeah. Like, I don't hate anymore. I totally don't hate. I really, really love it. And so I don't know, who knows? Maybe you'll find more sexy photos of me on my Instagram. And if you hate on me, then that's some sister wound that you need to look at. But there are just so many different sides to this. I feel like there are so many things that I can talk to you about this. And there was actually this really cool graphic that I saw on Instagram, and it was by the user. The handle is at moon_body, and I will link it in my show notes. But she described the sister wound healing cycle very, I mean, it was amazing. I used it in my presentation at work. Obviously, I credited her, but I want to share it here. And so the first step is other women are triggered and project onto her, right? And so when you think about jealousy, you are totally hating on this bitch. You're like, I don't like her, blah, blah, blah. Who does she think she is? You're just talking mad shit. And then you begin embodying your own authentic expression, right? Because you start to realize, I mean, jealousy, that's a shadow side. But on the other side of that, the lighter side is realizing that the jealousy is just shining a light on what you truly want and desire, right? So anytime you have jealousy, you can actually look at it as a sense of, oh, I'm jealous right now. I want what she has. I want that too. I want that for myself. Thank you for showing me that, girl. All right. I'm going to be sexy too in my Instagram photos or like, whatever. I don't know, maybe they're doing a hobby and you're like, oh, I want to do that too. Or maybe they're going to school and I want to go to school too, like whatever it is. But it's just a way for you to realize what are your deepest desires that are repressed and hidden. And then the next part of healing the wound is you become each other's teachers, friends, and allies. And so, because of that, you start to share your experience, just as like what I'm doing now. You start to help people heal their sister wound. You start to become their friend, just as how in relationships you can have healing experiences. And so, you start to create this safe space, this safe container to understand, wow, like what what sister wound is coming up for me? How is it coming up for me and showing up? And I get to heal it with this person because they actually want what's best for me, or they're sharing their amazing experiences and lessons, or they're actually showing me this new thing that I actually want for myself that it's disowned. And then the last step is the woman embodies and shares her authentic expression, right? She becomes more of herself. She becomes more aligned to her truth. She becomes more connected to her inner guidance. She becomes more connected to her inner wisdom. And she starts to, little by little, unapologetically become herself, right? And so, at the end of the day, we often say, we're all connected. We are all mirrors for each other. Whatever I dislike in you, I dislike in myself. Whatever I love in you, I love in myself. And if you have that perspective and you truly believe that that resonates with you and you believe in it, then when you are hating on someone, when your sister wound is coming up, really understand what is a part of you that is wanting to almost be like them if jealousy is involved, right? And so, some of the self-love tools that have helped me, and I've mentioned it a little bit here and there in this episode, but it's just reflecting that self-awareness piece. Honestly, it is the self-awareness piece to your internal world, your internal environment. That is the key. That is the key to helping you, you know, really, really transcend and heal this wound. And honestly, like any wound, any pattern, self awareness into your internal environment, your internal realm, that will allow you to understand what is coming up for you, what experiences are being projected onto the experience that's triggering you, all of that stuff. And so, really think about, how is a sister wound showing up? um how, what experience does this come from, and what is this teaching me, what is this showing me that I truly desire for myself, and most importantly, how can I be different? Right, we often talk about, so I did not talk about that, of owning it, of what it means to be a sister to others. And I think that is a very integral part of healing the sister wound for the collective, for the community, is okay, so maybe you've had some bad experiences with other women and you're like, damn, I do not like that. You definitely caused me more harm. Use that as momentum, use that as juice and fire to be someone different in the world so you can create more healing experiences, you know? And so really think about, okay, what is the part that I want to play? What is the contribution of being a sister to other people, for me? How am I doing my duty to help other women? Am I lifting them up? Am I cheering them on? Am I giving them opportunities, whether it be at work or, however you conduct your life? But really think about, what is your part in all of this? And then also thinking about the contrary action. So thinking of, how would I act differently if I didn't have this wound, right? And so in the case of, my relationship with my partner, like, how would I act differently if I didn't have this wound of feeling insecure before, right? I would be willing to listen to experiences of the past and understanding that they shape him. I would be an amazing girlfriend. No, just kidding. But, if you can't think about how would I act differently, just say, how can I be more honest about what's coming up for me? I think that's more real, right? It's like sometimes we think we have to meet this pedestal of who we are, and then we condemn ourselves and criticize and judge ourselves for not being there yet. And it's like we just miss the baby steps to get there. And so maybe the baby step for me would be like, hey, it's really triggering me and it's making me think about this, and this is where it comes from. Right. So giving your partner the playbook to where does it come from and what are you feeling, instead of snapping at them and assuming these stories that can sometimes come from your head, but actually explaining it and letting them in on the stories so they can understand, like, oh, you're feeling wounded right now. Okay. Because behind the jealousy and the anger is sadness, right? And so once you're feeling your anger and jealousy and comparison and frustration and all that stuff, really lean into the sadness and try to express yourself from that. And so that's how I would act if, that's how I would act differently. Okay. And then if I feel triggered, then I would like to do inner child work. And so that means going to little Lisa and saying, hey, baby girl, I know this is coming up for you and you're feeling like you're less than and you're unworthy, but what can I do for you? How do you want me to nurture you? How do you want me to love you? And I have a list of all the things that little Lisa loves to do. I remembered it from when I was a child. So usually that's like watching Sabrina the Teenage Witch, riding my bike, eating a burger, or, although I'm trying to not cut out red meat, but, it's just doing the things that she loves. And I actually give myself a hug. So I put my hand on my heart and my belly, and that's a hug. And I reassure her that she's loved and that she is whole. She doesn't have to compare to herself to anyone else. She doesn't have to be like anybody else or any of that stuff. And that's what I do. And so that was a lot. That was a lot. But I really, really hope it served you. And just really think about how you can help alleviate and help heal other people. I think that's the biggest takeaway, right? First you start with self, first you start healing yourself, and then those have a ripple effects. And the cool thing about it is that this weekend, this episode probably won't be released until later on, but I'm hosting my first women's self-love circle with a dear friend that I met on a women's retreat all about sensual awakening. And, we just totally vibed and we decided to do this thing together. And instead of thinking I need to do it by myself, I was feeling insecure about holding a women's circle because I had never done it in real life in capacity. Sure, I've done it online, but that's completely different to do it in person. And, my inner child was fearful of no one showing up to her circle, people making fun of her. And I saw that my dear sister was hosting a retreat and I said, hey, you want to collaborate? Like, hey, let's do this. And so we did. And we just did a live on our Instagram of how super juiced we are for doing all these things and, just helping other women connect in sisterhood and connect to each other and heal and talk about the things that we don't normally talk about, but just sharing it with a bunch of strangers because there's so much power in healing and connection and community, especially when you're with a group of women and talking in circle. And so, that's the next level of my business of just expanding my one-on-one coaching offerings of self-love into what does it look like in a circle and that capacity of holding space, right? It's a completely different skill set. It's being able to, allow space for women to go deeper, to connect with each other, to create these rituals, to help them hone in and embody these things that they want for themselves. And most importantly, heal their sister wound by connecting and sharing in truth and honesty and creating a safe space and letting them know that they can transcend and heal that wound and that part of them and that it doesn't have to define them and that maybe other people have that same wound. And so I'm super excited for the direction and the expansion and the impact of how my self-love coaching can reach more women, and just really owning and claiming that. Because for a while I thought, oh, I don't know if I just want to help women. And I thought, no, fuck yes, I do. I love helping women. I love helping them, nurture that part of themselves where they can cultivate more self love. And if they desire to be a mom, how can they be a mother to themselves first before they bring children into this world? Or if they do have children, then how can they be a better mom to themselves? So they can teach their child these things of how to love themselves more, because that's where it's really important when you pass these lessons on an intergenerational level, because we are all in each other's presence. It starts from the home. And so that is why I'm just so excited about holding circles and just sharing my experience of what has evolved with the sister wound until now. And so I will end it there. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to my story about my experience. I truly, truly hope this episode serves you. And if you want to work with me one-on-one, you can check out my website, lisamaycoaching.com. I have a page where I list all my offerings. You can book a discovery call with me. It's on there. And the next round of coaching will actually begin in the fall. So stay tuned for when it's open. You can get on the wait list. And like I mentioned, I'm really focusing on more in real life events. So if you're in the Bay Area, San Francisco, I hope to see you at some of my events. I'm going to be doing some women's circles, collaboration with other people, solo circles, all of that good stuff, and just like different workshops. So the best way ultimately though to stay connected is by subscribing to my newsletter, where I share weekly self-love tips, tools, offerings on how to work with me and any events that I'm hosting. Okay? So, anyways, thanks again so much for listening. But before I sign off, here's my question for you today. What are you doing to fill your self love cup and connect to the little you? All right. Bye, everyone. And I will catch you next time.